Space Cowboy Books presents Simultaneous Times, a science and speculative fiction podcast. Short stories to stir the imagination by contemporary authors.
To None Her Own by Julie Carpenter, with music by the author. Read by Dain Luscombe, Julie Crockett, Jean-Paul Garnier, and Zara.
On her 21st birthday, Octavia Crane received a gift from the Admiral of Mars Fleet. She nearly missed the door chime above the comforting racket of her father's kitchen, where she lounged against the countertop watching his swift knife transform an onion into tiny white cubes.
Can you get that?
Asked her father, Nicholas, without glancing up from his work. Octavia smiled faintly. It was good to see him in his element again. At the door, a kid her age wearing a Mars crimson dress uniform offered her a small gray steel box. She took it from his white-gloved hands with a look that she hoped was both respectful and annoyed. Some of Ma's old friends were just now hearing of her passing 3 years later, as word dispersed through trade and military channels back to Prima Sol. Octavia feared she might be receiving belated condolences for the loss of her mother for years to come. Leaving the curry to simmer, he joined her in the living room.
Was that a Martian guard? They're pretty rare on Veles these days. Must be from one of Serena's old co-workers.
In reply, Octavia tilted the lid of the box towards him so he could see the stamp of the Admiralty for himself. The sight of the Admiral's crest knocked the wind out of him. She froze, wishing she could hide the box and undo the damage, but it was too late.
Let's sit for a minute. I need to think.
Nicholas poured himself a glass of wine and sat down next to Octavia. He knew this package would come one day, but he'd postponed the decision. Serena had maintained that she wanted the pivotal events of her arrival on Veles and her role in history to remain private. His wife's sudden death left him devastated and bearing the burden of choice. Who knew what she would have wanted in the future, or regardless of her wishes, what would be best for Octavia? Serena and Octavia had often clashed, quietly or loudly, but Serena's love for her child was obvious to anyone. What more did Octavia need to know, he wondered. Once known, it could not be forgotten. A new chapter would change the meaning of their story.
Octavia, this box is for you. Open it, and I hope you won't be angry with me, even if I don't know everything that may be in there.
Octavia didn't really feel like delving into a mystery from her mother's old life, but her father's tone was rarely so serious. Nicholas, giving her some privacy, slipped back to his steaming cookery. She flipped the latch, lifted the lid, and took out a paper note and an old-fashioned media tablet. Greetings, Octavia. The enclosed is for your eyes only. As one of Serena's oldest friends, I feel justified in placing my trust in you, as I'm sure she would have someday. She insisted on carrying too much alone. Best wishes upon your 21st. Activating the tablet, she saw it contained a list of dated log files. She played the first envoy log, dated 21 years ago.
I was driven to the settlement nearest the airfield to meet Prime Minister Marco and his inner council. They appeared direct and friendly people eager to re-establish relations with the solar system their ancestors fled 800 years ago. Concentric rings set into a steep rocky cliff comprised the city and agricultural structures. Records are fragmentary as always, but it's believed Veles was colonized by a wide assortment of generation ships from pre-collapse states. Their expertise in terraforming, genetic engineering, and ecology are obviously profitable exchanges for Prima Sol. In turn, our physics far outpaces theirs, probably because they spent several centuries just trying to survive. The number of plant and animal species they retain is limited. I plan to gift them a seed kit that will be of great value to Veles. Tomorrow I will tour the farming rings at the base of the colony in order to understand how they have attained self-sufficiency, a feat we have never fully achieved on Mars without renewed input from Earth.
Octavia pressed play on the first audio file marked personal.
Exhausted does not begin to describe it. Last month, a pregnancy on a planet with even slightly greater than Earth gravity is not to be recommended. The locals all have genetic mods to help cope, but I imagine the years before they perfected those were rough. Maybe that's why they all seem so confident. Inherited pioneer spirit. PM Marco is a formidable man, tall and silent. He's less eager than his council to establish relations. While they chatter on, he listens carefully and asks pointed questions. His young agricultural specialist is another story. He made us lunch and couldn't stop interrogating me about all the Earth recipes I could remember. He said he'd searched the old databases for what pregnant Earth women like to eat. He apologized, saying that although they had loads of pickles, there was no ice cream on Velis due to their tiny dairy herd being all goats. Handsome guy called Nicholas. I wonder if he likes absolutely massive redheads. Probably not. And I've got bigger problems coming soon. Oh, Serena. You've really done the ultimate breakup, haven't you? Not even orbiting the same sun anymore. Last time that fella will ask a girl for space, I expect. This place could grow on me, though. No areas restricted due to radiation, no graveyard cities peeking out from the sea. There's an air of hope here. The challenge here is to meet the future. While back on Mars and Earth, we salvage what we can from the wreckage of the past.
Octavia raised an eyebrow, but her father was pointedly absorbed in his craft. She delved onward. The envoy logs described touring the settlement, learning how the heat from industry on the lower rings was used to power the homes above, how the colony protected itself from the extremes of Vele's seasons by retreating into a rock or using windows to create a greenhouse effect. Suddenly, a few days' gap appeared in the dates, and then an audio personal log. Serena's voice was so thin and pained that Octavia barely recognized her.
I've got to pull it together. This is a nightmare. When I took this job, I told the Admiral that the mission came first, that I would do everything in my power to bring Velis into cooperation. Despite everything, I thought I was the best person for the job, and I was so cocky I didn't take the risks seriously. And after all, isn't it safer here than there anyway? I know we need them. Mars is a spoiled child draining its dying parent. Humanity must finally really leave Earth behind if we are to have a future. But I have to be here in my skin, living this reality. I can't do this. It's impossible.
Plaintive sobs followed until the recording cut off. In the next envoy log, Serena's voice was calmer.
Apologies to Primo Sol Command for the delay, but there's been an incident. We have encountered a treacherous chasm between our culture and that of Velis. It is perhaps an insurmountable one. I cannot say more at this juncture, but suffice it to say, no one is more eager for a resolution than I am. PM Marco has explained the historical roots of this practice to me, and I can see how it helped them survive, but I cannot see how anyone we send here can be expected to participate.
A text envoy log timestamped a few hours later explained.
The following is the historical account delivered by PM Marco to myself while I was still in hospital. I have recorded it precisely in hopes of somehow discovering a path forward.
Marco began. As you know, in the early era of the Great Collapse on Earth, any state wealthy enough sent out generation ships towards hopeful exoplanets. Secrecy surrounded the launches because no one wanted to share their best bets with rivals. Apparently, Velez caught the eye of several factions, every single one of which hated or distrusted the other. The first boots on the ground were Russian, the children and grandchildren of those who fled Earth. Half a dozen ships followed over the next 20 years. They sabotaged and stole from each other in fierce competition for this new world, until all were limping along with dwindling supplies, fragmentary knowledge, and worst of all, limited genetic diversity. The old Earth conflicts replayed themselves on a new stage, the combatants embittered and isolated after decades of space travel. The leader of the Russian faction at this crucial time was an engineer named Olga Komarov, who had recently given birth to a son. By her calculations, none of the colonies would survive the year on their own. She secretly approached the leaders of every faction with an ingenious deal, and only one accepted. There was an immediate bond between these two colonies, and they prospered from the exchange of genes and tech. The other factions took notice, and eventually all signed a treaty which formalized the greatest social engineering experiment in human history. The treaty states that every child born on Velez will be immediately exchanged with another randomly chosen child, with the aim of creating a planet-wide human family. Everyone worked to create a society that could be trusted to care for all of its members, as you would want every family to have the same chances as your own. As the population grew, it was possible to randomize the exchanges so that all of the old links of nationality were lost. Now, 800 years later, this way of creating families seems as natural to us as your direct kinship seems to you. Trust is inherent in this treaty, and what Prima Sol is asking Velez to do is to trust them. If your world has, as you claim, moved on from the bloody mistakes of history, then you will accept this child of Velez as your own, just as the Velesian mother would accept the child you have given her. We will require this of any future colonists as well, because we will not allow tribal conflicts to flare again. If you, Earth's chosen emissary, cannot do this, then we are not interested in having further contact with Prima Sol. Octavia hesitated, unsure if she wanted to hear the rest. Nicholas had come back to sit beside her, drawn to Serena's voice. The silence was heavy as Octavia played the last personal video entry. Serena's eyes wore dark circles from crying or lost sleep, her fiery hair in a pixie cut, unflattering to her round, pale face. She was still sniffing, but sounded a little relieved.
Well, I've done it. I don't know how, but I've done it. This little alien is my little alien now, for what it's worth. I had decided not to. To hell with reunification. I was staring all heartless at the dark-haired, copper-skinned, not mine child in the cot next to the bed and was about to ring the nurse and tell her to take it when Nicholas showed up. The sweet bastard. Well, they have no roses, so he brought apple blossoms. We're friends a little, so I asked him, how did it feel, not knowing who your parents really were? You didn't want to meet them? He had a huge laugh about it, then realized I was serious and grew embarrassed. He pulled over a chair and sat in it backwards the way charming men do sometimes. He said, when I was growing up, I was so curious about Earth and what it would have been like to live there. We had a small archive of music and a few films, and I devoured them. Books, too. They were from all over old Earth, translated and donated into an archive for all to enjoy. These stories are so puzzling to us because our concept of related has been expanded. The idea of dying for a line drawn on a map or a colored bit of cloth. There's no difference between me and the man on the other side of the line. I'm the son of all the fathers and mothers who escaped a dying planet because they weren't ready to give up yet. Genes are just instructions for sequencing proteins. They aren't memories or songs or stories, and certainly they are not love. And that was when I realized I had to keep her, the little alien, and rejoin Earth to the colony of Velis. I have to stay here and figure out how they have broken humanity to somehow make it whole.
The screen went dark, leaving the little family alone again. Fragrant steam from spicy dishes swirled around them. Octavia said softly,
I knew we were an early reunification family, but I had no idea. And now there's so many. Do you think the Admiral sent a package to the other child?
Nicholas sipped his wine.
I don't know, but I hope not. It's not his or her truth, really. It's for those who knew your mother.
The rising scents of cardamom and cumin tied them all the way back to Earth across the light years to the first home of the human family. The celebration dinner was perhaps a little subdued, but nonetheless savored, for knowing how hard it had been won.
La Incubadora by Anastasia Wasko, with music by Red Blue Black Silver, read by Zara and Jean-Paul Garnier.
I wanted to know when hosts the virus came to Earth. I used a form of communication called light pulse. I asked the rocks of the Bahia for information by sending rapid bursts of electrical activity. The rocks, old and wise and containing memories of the things that have transpired in one place and all places, showing me the bright green blaze as it fell into Earth. It was a time before electricity, and towns, and me. The Periku people lived in scattered groups on the shoreline of the Bahia, were peaceful pre-humans. They hunted and gathered and harvested from the Sea of Cortez. The rocks of the Bahia watched as the bright green overtook the body of the girl Periku, who, one moment bent over, gathered clams from the shoreline, suddenly stood up and writhed until she writhed no more. Then she stood still. The virus from space had entered the Earth host and began what it was programmed to do: replicate, consume, and disintegrate. The girl returned to her tribe, all hairy, naked creatures. She was not different on the outside, except that day after day on the bay, she didn't eat any food or drink any water, and she ceased vocal, intentional communication. The tribe did not punish her for her relinquished resources or Stum demeanor. She was dead, animated by the virus from space. La Incubadora, the name I've given her, along with tribe members, ate the hearts out of the cadavers. He Periku believed the spirit lived in the heart. This was her programming and custom. Generations passed and she didn't age. She ate hearts. As members then generations of her tribe died out, she ate the hearts of the remaining cadavers because that was the tradition of her tribe. But then the generations of the other Periku became extinct from European blades and disease. Their cultural memories stored in her zombie heart, which is the true seat of consciousness, the way the geo-memories of the earth stored in the information that vibrated in the rocks of the Bahia stayed alive. And then La Incubadora moved to other groups, learning to not be seen, avoiding modern humans because the sounds of their language caused confusion in the virus's audio processing abilities. I asked the rocks about the transition to machine rule. Their ambivalence could be construed as passive resistance to the way humans have colonized all things on Earth. The rocks did not answer my question, but they showed me how the cells that flaked off the incubator Periku girl dissolved into the dust that created the ground that transmitted waves of information across great distances. The rocks conveyed through a series of fast images. La Incubadora transversing barrenness of Baja California, a perpetually wild land, full of hills and mountains and flanked by seas and carpets of cactus. Time piled up in the form of dust that is material waste. Pieces of skin and hair and body oil slid into piles only perceptible to beings that can read geomagnetic impressions. I saw how La Incubadora manipulated her form. I saw 100 years before present time, when she left the East Cape for the west and north of the peninsula. She traveled. She cackled and chortled and howled. She moved. When La Incubadora stepped over the 3 peaks of the giant Tres Virgenes volcanoes, she grew to enormous heights. When she stepped across valleys full of giants, cactus 30 feet tall, she grew small. Brown matted and coarse hair on her legs and arms, under and over, and pubic area and head sometimes caught cactus needles. She carried them for years. I saw La Incubadora enter the wild settlement in the north of the peninsula, a mass of humans that grew and grew. I saw her emotionless face. I saw her body move over the severe terrain in the high hills of Tijuana. The ground is coarse, and tufts of long grass and piles of tires and concrete walls with glass spikes. It is here La Incubadora walked, unseen, tiny, 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 a fantastic shiver crawling up the spines of humans who smelled of alcohol and violence. She ate the dead's hearts, and the virus inside of her replicated, consumed, disintegrated the traces of human information. I took the skin, hair, body oil, discarded, the body of the Parakou girl with regenerating flesh, falling flesh, living and dying, decomposing into pieces, falling into the soil, and communing with the rocks, where the pieces of pregnant information fell onto me. And I held it. And I placed it into the story the rocks told me, so that information was added to the memory bank of Earth. But the existing cycle of information retrieval, storage, disintegration through consumption allows me, I, microplastic, to exist and fulfill my role. I catalog information. Despite my access to the proceedings of Earth, I do not understand and process on a meaningful level, so I, could not integrate it into the greater plan for Earth. I am a keeper of the plan. It is my job. That is why I asked the rocks to tell me the origin story. This is how I learned that the Parakou people's practice, consume the hearts of their dead, changed something in the Earth that changed something in the humans there, that changed something in the host, that changed something in the environment, that communicated to me via the rocks that they've shown this fusion of alien-human existed and would disrupt the cosmic order when the time came. Nowhere in the plan is the effect of heart-eating and alien programming recorded. I surmise this is the condition that changed everything, and that's how we've arrived here with the story of the Parakou girl host who, after incubation of thousands of years, is reanimating with soul life. I watch from in the ground on which she stands. I hear and feel and sense the Parakou girl thrashing with the image of the scene of the memory of the man's brain she recently ate.
But I saw it on the internet. Some kind of meteorite or some shit. The electric wires around Joshua Tree snapped, and the Marine dudes in 29 are more vacant than ever. Something's in the air. Something happened.
I know the activator has arrived, and the cascade of dissolution of Earth will now proceed accelerated. But what I did not know, what the rocks suddenly tell me through refusal to tell me, the thing they've known all along. The Parakou girl has regenerated, recelled, physically reborn many times over, and it is the virus that has been dissolved from the material. The soul may return. The host has outprogrammed the alien. She is the soul creature that retains memories that are part alien, part human. And when she realizes this, she will make choices that gods make. We will not know the difference between humans and gods. It that disrupts the plan. I must stop her existence.
In this episode of Simultaneous Times, you heard To None Her Own by Julie Carpenter, with music by the author, and La Incubadora by Anastasia Wasko, with music by Red, Blue, Black, Silver. Theme music by Dain Luscombe. Out now, Simultaneous Times, Volume 1, Paperback Science Fiction Anthology, available at spacecowboybooks.com and lulu.com. Be sure to visit us at our store in Joshua Tree, California, or at spacecowboybooks.com. And connect with us on Instagram or Twitter. We'd love to know what you think of the program. And now a word from other fellow Joshua Tree podcasters.
Have you ever wondered why people live in the desert? I'm Dawn Davis, and I host Desert Lady Diaries podcast. It's a weekly conversation with women who found their home in the Mojave Desert. Each week, I talk to women who were either born and raised in the desert or felt called to come here, and what the desert means to them. You can learn more about the podcast and listen at desertladydiaries.com.